What is up, YouTube? We are coming back with another video today. We are going to be going over my RB 11 through 20 rankings. Of course, if you did not watch the video from yesterday, we dove into the RBs 1 through 10. There were a little bit of interesting takes there. So if you have not checked that out, please go check that out as well. And let's get into the intro. So we are, like I said, diving into RBs 11 through 20. We are doing this one take Drake style again today. So bear with me. Hopefully I do not ramble, but we are starting off with number 11. We are going with DeAndre Swift. Now, DeAndre Swift, for a lot of you, probably should have been on the RBs 1 through 10 list. I personally have Javonte Williams over DeAndre Swift, but it's so close. That's probably why I'm not getting a lot of DeAndre Swift. And there's not a lot of negatives to DeAndre Swift's profile and exactly who he is and how he's kind of been playing on a year-to-year basis, because last year he was the RB8 on a points per game basis. So if we actually take a look at player profiler, we can see that he averaged 16.1 fantasy points per game, had 7 touchdowns and 62 total receptions in only 13 games played. And I think that now, listen, I've talked about how I view upside and how I think that might be one of the most important things when we're evaluating running backs. I think DeAndre Swift has top 6 or 7 upside. I just think his floor is way lower than what we may be thinking. And granted, maybe we saw the floor within his rookie season when he averaged 14.6 fantasy points per game, which put him as the RB15. I kind of have him as the RB12 to 13 on a points per game basis, and that is kind of why I have him lower down my rankings. I think if we knew that the Lions were going to have an absolute amazing offense, granted, I know they did make major improvements. We do know Amon-Ra Brown is a really good wide receiver. Jameson Williams will be coming back at some point this year. TJ Hawkinson. I just don't think that the Detroit Lions offense puts it all together this year. And so that is why I'm a little bit hesitant as putting DeAndre Swift on my board. Of course, if we're talking dynasty rankings, DeAndre Swift is in my top 10, but we are talking redraft here. And so that is kind of why I am leaning towards having DeAndre Swift at my RB11. He does have the upside, but he is a receiving back too, so he will be getting those PPR points. But I just think he's not going to be getting the full volume that we may be expecting, just based on some of his previous historical stats. So that is some of my thoughts with DeAndre Swift. My RB12 is going to be Alvin Kamara. Now, Alvin Kamara would be way higher. Like if we knew for a fact that he was not going to get suspended this whole entire season, like Alvin Kamara is probably my RB7, RB6. Because he's just that talented. He's that elite. And he gets the receptions. Everyone remembers the Christmas time game where he scored 6 touchdowns. Was it 6 or 7 touchdowns? Like, absolute historic game. But then last year, only averaged 16.1 fantasy points. I say only, but that was still RB8 on a points per game basis if we are looking here at player profiler. And I think we have to consider, like, what's going to happen with Alvin Kamara's suspension. Like, that's the main thing that I am thinking about with Alvin Kamara, because if he gets suspended mid-year or whatever, I know I do follow some lawyers on Twitter, and they are saying that there's a very low likelihood that Alvin Kamara does get suspended and it's going to get pushed until 2023. And if that's the case, then you are getting amazing value with Alvin Kamara in the second round of your fantasy football leagues. You might be getting an RB1 that you could have drafted in the first round. I've been starting to see Alvin Kamara creep up into the early second, late first. And I just don't know if I have the guts to be able to draft him that high, especially if you are playing in a league where you're trying to win some money, with the risk that maybe week 8, week 10, something happens in his court case. The court case gets pushed up, and then all of a sudden, Alvin Kamara is in a little bit of trouble, and you are looking at yourself like, why did I draft this guy? And so I tend to like to stay away from those type of circumstances, but Alvin Kamara does have that elite ceiling, and so I will not fault you at all if you draft him and if you have him higher in your rankings, so let me know. My RB13 is going to be Leonard Fournette. So good old playoff Lenny, good old, little bit overweight Lenny. Man has gotten himself back in shape this offseason. And I think we have to also, like, when we're looking at Leonard Fournette, he's playing with Tom Brady. He's playing with an elite level quarterback. He's going to be playing an elite level offense. Based on what he did last year, I know he kind of came out of the fold last year and just absolutely emerged as one of those RB dead zone running backs. But we're gonna take a look here at player profile. Last year averaged 18.3 fantasy points per game, which put him as the RB3, had 10 total touchdowns, 69 total receptions for 454 yards, 180 rushing attempts for 811 yards. Now, 180 rushing attempts isn't a ton of attempts, but he absolutely killed it with the receptions, having 69 receptions and 10 total touchdowns. So why do I not think he's going to repeat and be a top 10 running back? Why don't I think he's going to be like the top 6 running back that he was last year? I just think it comes down to the fact that they drafted Rashard White in the 3rd round. There's already been reports that Rashard White is a better pass catching back out of the backfield. We've known Tom Brady in the past. He really likes to have a solid like first and second down guy and a third down guy. And I think we're really undervaluing the fact that Rashard White is a very talented rookie running back. And in a normal draft class, we would probably be like, oh, that guy's going to be the starter. But the fact that he's playing behind Leonard Fournette, we're just kind of giving him a little bit of a discount. So I'm a little bit worried about that. Of course, I'm also worried about the fact that they lost 3 offensive linemen. Alex Kappa goes to the Bengals. And then, of course, they lose their center Jensen to injury, and he's probably going to be out for years. So just having a little bit worse offensive line means they're probably going to be throwing the ball more. He's probably going to have to pass protect a little bit more if he is in the game when they are throwing the ball. And so that's just some of the reasons why I have Lenny as my RB13. You might be having him and taking him a lot higher, but let me know. RB13, feeling pretty good about that. But my RB14 is going to be Nick Chubb. Now, I know this is going to be a surprise to some people because Nick Chubb does not go RB14 at all, ever, when he is being drafted. Right now, he is going off at RB13, and I've even been seeing him go as RB10, RB9. Some people just absolutely love Nick Chubb, and I understand, like, Nick Chubb has been pretty consistent throughout his whole career, but that's what he is. He's a consistent running back. He has no upside because everyone says, like, oh, Nick Chubb might be the best pure runner in the NFL. Like, that is always said by, like, analysts, and then talking about fantasy football, and I agree with that. But he, like I said, he does not have the pass catching work. So, like, if we look at last year, 2021, he had 14 total games played. Of course, we all kind of remember he got a little bit banged up. 228 rushing attempts for 1,259 yards. You're like, okay, cool. He got a decent amount of rushing attempts. But this is where the upside caps him. He only had 20 receptions for 174 yards and 9 total touchdowns, putting him at 15.4 fantasy points per game as the RB10 on a points per game basis. 20 receptions. The year before that had 16, and then the year before that had 36. Now, of course, the Browns do still have Kareem Hunt, who is like the third down workhorse, who somehow always ends up like the end of the season finish somewhere between RB12 to RB14. And there are rumors that he's going to get traded, but that hasn't happened yet. And Deshaun Watson officially is not going to be playing for the first 12 games of the NFL season, which makes me think they're going to be relying on Nick Chubb. Jacoby Brissett's going to be the starting quarterback, but yet all the defenses are going to be stacking the box because really Jacoby Brissett only has David Njoku and Amari Cooper to throw to. Depends on how you feel about Donovan Peoples-Jones and David Bell. But I think we just kind of have to lower our expectations with Nick Chubb, especially for this year. And of course, he averages almost 5 yards a carry. So maybe if he gets 250, 260 rushing attempts, we could be saying, oh, this is a great value to get Nick Chubb. But I don't think that's going to be the case this year just because of the fact that Kareem Hunt's still there. Dearness Johnson's there and Jerome Ford's there. They have a really solid backfield. And so I don't think they at all intend to roll out a committee, and Nick Chubb will lead that committee. But we're playing fantasy football here, and that is kind of why I don't see the upside. Our next running back at RB15 is going to be Ezekiel Elliott. Now, Ezekiel Elliott playing with the Cowboys, every single year we try to push Tony Pollard. We try to push the narrative, Zeke's wash, Zeke's wash, Zeke's wash. Now I'm an Ohio State fan, but I don't think that's necessarily the case looking at the stats. So if we take a look at Player Profiler again, we can definitely see that Zeke averaged only 14.8 fantasy points per game, put him at RB15. He did finish the year as an RB1 just because he played 17 games. He always seems to play 17 games. He's always nicked, like, he's got like a knee sprain, like a pointer hip or something, and somehow still always plays. If we can see, played 15 and 16 games the years before. He had 237 rush attempts for 1,002 yards for 4.2 yards per carry. So the yards per carry kind of has been going down. Only had 47 receptions for 287 yards and 12 total touchdowns. That is a solid running back finish, and there's nothing to make us think that Zeke won't do that again. And based on the offense, based on the fact that they got rid of Amari Cooper, Michael Gallup's coming off injury, they're really only going to have CeeDee Lamb and Dalton Schultz, maybe Jalen Tolbert. They've already talked about Tony Pollard being on the field at the same time with Zeke, catching passes. So I'm very confident drafting Zeke in the 3rd round, especially as my RB15. If you went with a receiver like in the 1st round, somehow Zeke falls to you in the 3rd, would not at all be worried about taking Zeke as my RB2. If you went 0 RB and all of a sudden Zeke is like your hero RB in the third. Might be feeling a little bit more risky about that, but I think that is good value getting Zeke at your RB2 spot as my overall RB15. My RB16 is going to be James Conner. Now, James Conner put up ridiculous stats last year. Right now, he is going off the board as he's going off the board 34th overall over on Underdog. Last year, I had 18 total touchdowns. 18 total touchdowns. And do we think he's going to repeat that? I don't know, because he averaged 17.2 fantasy points per game, won a lot of zero running back truthers, a lot of leagues, had 37 receptions, 375 yards, and had 202 total attempts. Really, that touchdown number, 18 total touchdowns. The year before had 6 and 7. I know he wasn't on Arizona, so it's kind of hard to necessarily view the previous years. But what is there really going for James Conner? He played 15 games this last season, which was like pretty much almost like a career high for him. He usually only plays 10 to 13 because he's a really hard runner in between the tackles. 18 total touchdowns. Like, are we thinking he's going to get 18 total touchdowns again? I don't know. I mean, you have the running quarterback in Kyler Murray. You now have Hollywood Brown, Zach Ertz, Rondell Moore as the receivers. And then, of course, DeAndre Hopkins is going to be coming back after the 6-game suspension that he has. I think James Conner is a safe pick in the third round. I just think you got to lower your expectations and don't be thinking you're going to be getting a fantasy running back 7 on a points per game basis just because you drafted him in the third round. My next running back, and so what? This is almost going to be running back 16, is going to be Travis Etienne. Absolutely nothing. Travis Etienne hasn't done anything up to in his career at this point. But of course, if you know me, we've been talking about this with our running back rankings. We are shooting for upside. And so Travis Etienne last year, of course, had the Liz Frank injury. So he was out. He was injured. He wasn't able to play. But he did have that first round draft capital. We will just show you kind of the stats of what Travis Etienne was as a prospect. Of course, 5'10", 215, ran a 4.5 40, and had 104 speed score, which put him in the 80th percentile. You can look at the burst score, anything like that, but DeAndre Swift is his top comp. I know a lot of people loved Travis Etienne coming out of school, and we just have to look at the way that he's going to be used. Of course, he's reuniting with his college quarterback in Trevor Lawrence. They got rid of Urban Meyer, and so they've already come out with reports this offseason that they're going to be using him a little bit like in that Deebo Samuel role. And so my thing is, if he's a mini DeAndre Swift, if he is a Alvin Kamara light version, and you're getting him in the back end of the third right now, earlier this offseason, you could be getting him in your redraft leagues in the middle of the fourth, early fourth, but now his ADP has crept up into the back end of the third, which I still think is great value because he does have that elite upside that we look for when we're going for these, receptions, pass catching backs that also have maybe a third down workload and could be a workhorse back. So I think Travis Etienne is a really good shot, especially if you maybe went heavy RB and you had drafted 2 RBs and then all of a sudden you come back and Travis Etienne is sitting there. Might be a really good pickup for you, but that is why I have Travis Etienne as my RB17. My RB18, I have David Montgomery. Nothing good has happened for the Bears this offseason, but David Montgomery has really kind of become this really consistent fantasy option for fantasy owners over the last few years. If we look at Player Profiler again, 15.1 fantasy points per game, put him as the RB12 last year in 2021. 17.7 fantasy points per game, RB6 on the year in 2020. Lots of good things. Like he's getting around 220 to 240 attempts a year. I know last year he was a little bit injured, so the yards were a little bit down. Still getting somewhere around like 40 to 50 receptions. That is really solid production. And if you can get that as your RB2, really great value. I think David Montgomery is a safe pick, especially considering the fact that the Bears are just going to be bad. They're going to have to give the ball to someone. Justin Fields has absolutely no one to throw it to. And maybe that's going to cause the box to be stacked and David Montgomery's not going to be able to rush the ball as well. But at this point in the draft, when you're in the third rounds, early fourth, like you are shooting for volume with these running backs, and David Montgomery is definitely going to be getting the volume. My RB19 is going to be Breece Hall. Now, nothing has been known about Breece Hall because he is a rookie, but he came in with the same pedigree that Jonathan Taylor has. If we look at Player Profiler, we will actually see that his best comparable metric is Jonathan Taylor. He ran a 4.39 40, 169 burst score, or 131 burst score, and then 169.9 speed score. Breece Hall, when we are evaluating these prospects, like that is what we want. And I think sometimes we as a fantasy community, we kind of push down these rookies. And sometimes we overhype them a little bit, but Breece Hall, I think he's appropriately priced. And I think if he actually hits, he will win a lot of people their fantasy football leagues because you are getting him in the back end of the third, early fourth round. He has that upside. Of course. Okay, he's playing for the Jets. We all hear you on that one. But Breece Hall is a solid prospect. And running back is the easiest position from college to be able to adjust to in the NFL because really you're running a lot of the same plays. Granted, everyone's faster, stronger, but it's really the same concepts. And so I am not worried about Breece Hall at all. Mekhi Becton, their tackle, got hurt. Zach Wilson's going to be out. They're going to have to feed the ball to Breece Hall. And cool, maybe he only averages 3.54 yards a carry, but I think he's going to get the volume. They spent a high second-round pick on him. He's going to get the volume to be able to show out. And so Breece Hall, very solid option for you in that third to fourth round range. And we are getting to my RB20 is going to be J.K. Dobbins. I could have gone a lot of different ways. I could have gone Cam Akers. I'm not a Cam Akers fan. I think they're going to be splitting the work pretty evenly between Cam Akers and Darrell Henderson. Why do I think Jake? And you're probably going to think I spoke high on Zeke and now I'm high on J.K. Dobbins. It's just the Ohio State homer. No. J.K. Dobbins is playing in a rush first offense. Granted, I know there's Lamar Jackson. I know Gus Edwards is also there, but we actually do not know the full extent of what Gus Edwards' health is currently at the moment. But if we look at how he performed in his rookie season, of course, only averaged 11.2 fantasy points per game. But what can we see? He had 134 rush attempts for 805 yards, 6 yards per carry, 18 receptions for 120 and 9 yards. Now, most running backs, first year off an ACL tear, they are not feeling the same. They are not performing the same. Just look at how Saquon Barkley performed last year. But let's say this yards per carry goes down to, let's say, 4.5 yards a carry. That is awesome production still coming from J.K. Dobbins. Let's say he's healthy by week 2 or 3. And so this year he gets somewhere around 200 rush attempts. All of a sudden, you're adding 70 rushing attempts to this 805 yards. He's rushing for somewhere around 1,500 to 1,700 yards. And those receptions are going to go up from 18 to, I would say, somewhere around 35 to 38, reasonably. And let's just keep the touchdowns totally the same. All of a sudden, J.K. Dobbins is a top 15, 17 running back. And you are drafting him at RB20. And I've even seen him going later. Like right now on Underdog, he's going at pick 56. So he's going somewhere around RB20 to RB24. And that's just great value with J.K. Dobbins. We know what he is. We know the product that he was. Hopefully he can come back to full health. He is only 23 years old. So I think the upside is there for J.K. Dobbins to absolutely smash as your RB2. Now, if you went 0 RB and J.K. Dobbins is your RB1, I'm feeling real risky about that. But I do think J.K. Dobbins has that. I don't think he has game-winning upside. I think he might have game-winning upside, but I don't think he has league-winning upside. We are shooting for that, and so that's why I highly encourage you to be taking those shots. I would say DeAndre Swift, Alvin Kamara are like the only two on this list that I would say really have shots to be like top 5 running backs. And that's why I put everyone else in my last video for yesterday. So if you didn't check that out, check that out. But that is my rankings, my top 20 running back rankings. If you stuck around this whole time, I do appreciate you. We'll be doing my wide receivers tomorrow. We'll be doing 1 through 10. So if you like this video, please like, please subscribe. If you haven't checked out the video from yesterday, go check out the video from yesterday. I think the video from yesterday might be a little bit better, but I do appreciate you guys being here, and I will catch you next week on the flip side.